he come running back, and he had a look on his face that I could see even from 80 yards away. He's like, he come up to me running. He's blind. He's like, Shannon, you just shot the biggest bear I've ever seen. And now my buddy Scott, he likes to tease me a little bit. So I'm thinking, he's trying to amp me up. He's trying to be a stinker. I said, yeah, okay. He's like, no, look at my face. And I looked up and I'm like, you're serious? He's like, I am dead serious. You just shot the biggest bear I have ever seen. So I'm like, okay, well, what do we got to do? He's like, we're going to get a tarp out. We're going to put it in the sled. We'll put you in the sled. And then us guys will just drag you in the sled out to the bear. Because he, like I said, he ran about 100 yards before he piled up. And we get to this bear. And every deer, every bear, every turkey, whatever, has a little bit of ground shrinkage. They always look bigger when you shoot them than when they're actually on the ground. This was not the case. I got up to this bear and my jaw dropped.
Grab your gear, find your stand, and listen in as we share another journey that shapes a hunter's legacy.
Welcome back to another episode of A Hunter's Legacy, the only hunting podcast that ditches the pros for the average Joes. If you are interested or know of anybody that would be a good fit for the podcast, we're an open mic for all hunters that have a good legacy and want to share their story. This week we have Shannon from Michigan. What's going on, man?
Not a whole lot. How you doing?
Glad to have you on here. Sounds like you've had a eventful day.
I'll tell you what, man, life never goes the way you plan it. You can sit and make plans, but something always goes off the rails, or somebody stops by. It's always something.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. You're from Michigan, right?
Yep, I'm from Michigan. I'm 35 years old. I just turned 35 this month. I've got spina bifida, so I'm paralyzed from the waist down. Been in a chair since I was 2 years old. And anytime I talk about myself, tell, my life story, the first piece of advice I always give anybody, if you have little kids, for everything that is good in this world, do not put them in a chair. I found out at 2 years old, I can run over feet. I can go very, very fast. I can do donuts. I was a menace. Don't put a little kid in a wheelchair. It doesn't end well. But certainly as I've gotten older, I've gotten better.
What are some other options? Or are you just trying to be funny?
There's more of me to try to be funny.
You didn't cause any trouble, did you?
No, I was a perfect little angel.
No different than any other kid?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I'm sorry that you have had to go through that. It's one of those things where you can complain about life all you want, but the more you think about it, there's always going to be somebody that has it worse than you.
And that's exactly the way I look at it. Like, I have been, for someone in my situation, because I may have, what doctors classify as the worst case of spina bifida. It's not really that bad because I can still move. I can still get up out of bed. I work every day. I go hunting. I go fishing. I got my family, so it's like I still live an active life, a normal life by God's grace. There are so many other people that, have it worse than me that are just lying in bed that can't do anything. So, I really have nothing to complain about. I'm overall very healthy. I get the colds and flu of the season like everybody else, but life has been very good to me. I know there are a lot of other people that have spina bifida. In fact, one of my very good friends who just passed away a couple of years ago, he had spina bifida just like I did, just like I do. And he was active. He did get out and go hunting quite a bit, but he did spend quite a bit of time, in bed. He was able to do enough in a short amount of time. His endurance because of different things that he had going on that I don't. He could go hunting for a time or two and then he'd be down in bed for a few days, or, he'd be good for a week and then he'd be down in bed, whereas me, I don't have that. I stay out of bed. I'll sit on the couch and watch TV, but beyond that, I'll try to stay very active. But yeah, I've got him, I've got other people that through other disabilities, they might not be able to get out of bed. They might have to rely on someone to get them out of bed, into their chair, feed them, dress them, whatever. My point with that was just, I'm a lot better off than other people in my situation.
So we talked about your disability and stuff like that, and you talked about working, getting out and hunting. So I kind of want to talk about like the mental aspect of that because I'm sure that's you're very well spoken. So I'm not that familiar with what you have going on. So I'd like to know a little bit more about it, how you handle the mental struggles, and then maybe how hunting is a little bit of an escape for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad to talk about that. And I mean, for me, one of the things that I tell people, if you have questions, ask them. Like I am open. I try to be very honest because most people just want to learn. They just want to understand. Well, how do people learn? By asking questions. So, there are some people out there that aren't comfortable with it, and that's fine. Not everybody is comfortable talking about what they've got going on in their life for many different reasons, and that's fine. But I've always said, hey, I'd rather you ask. And if it's something that's too personal, I'll tell you, hey, at this time, I'd rather not answer that, maybe later on. But no, getting back to what you asked, the mental. So for me, and I will start out by saying I know not everybody has the mindset that I do in the sense of I was raised by two very godly parents. I was raised in the church. God has always been a very, very big part of my life. The outdoor page that I have on Facebook and YouTube that I've been working on the last few years, I've got Philippians 4:13 as like the main Bible verse, which states that I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And that for me is, in and of myself, I'm just a broken human. I can't in and of myself, I wouldn't have the strength to get up, go hunt, and whatever else. In and of myself, I would have just the mental status of, well, look at me. Like I can't do this. I'm just gonna sit around and do nothing. But God has always put it in my heart and in my mind to say, hey, this is not the wheelchair doesn't define you. The wheelchair is just a tool that I'm using to advance you, to use you to minister to other people, to give advice to other people. And I look at it that there are other people, they see me, how do you do this? How do you do that? And then I can talk to them. Be like, hey, look, this is what works for me. This might not work for you, but here's my advice. Take that, learn from it, use it, do whatever you will with it. So for me, God had always been there for me and given me a very positive mental attitude. And so, yeah, without that, without the positive mental attitude, you get stuck, and I would get stuck if I didn't have that. So that is so important to me.
Yeah, got started going to church at a young age, and you think that made a pretty big difference, huh?
Yeah, I think so.
What kind of church do you go to?
I go to a United Reformed church, so but kind of Dutch. I mean, that's probably the best way to say it. The kind of the old Dutch people go to it. I grew up kind of in the old school, singing hymns out of the old hymn book, stuff like that. So that's just kind of what I'm used to, and from that, I'm a Sunday school teacher. I help out in the nursery and just try to instill in the little kids too as they're growing up, going through school, going through different challenges. That hey, God will get you through that. Now, when I say that a lot of people misunderstand, and maybe that's me saying it wrong, but a lot of people misunderstand. That does not mean that life is going to be easy. That doesn't mean that I haven't had challenges. I've still had my fair share of challenges. I've had hospital stays. I've been in the hospital for 3 weeks, few months at a time. I've, gotten infections and actually almost died. I have had issues with my chair. I've had tires pop. I've had parts break away. I got squeaks and clicks and whatever else. But, you know, I still am able to look at the positive that it could always be worse, and even in my hospital stays, people saw that and, they were able to, gain a little bit better outlook on their own situation, and so, yeah, just because I say, yeah, God's been good to me and he has, but, I don't want anybody listening to misunderstand me to say that I've had a perfect life. That ain't been perfect, you know, being in a wheelchair, I always say it's not for the faint. Not for the faint of heart. It's not easy. I make it look easy, but it's not easy.
You know, life is what you make. It's all about perspective, isn't it?
Exactly. Exactly.
So tell us a little bit about how you got started hunting. So you've been in a wheelchair since 3. Do your parents hunt?
And the funny thing, I love telling my hunting story because my hunting story is vastly different than you might think because I did not grow up in a hunting family. My dad's I grew up in a hunting family, sort of. I should say it that way. Because like my dad's siblings, their his brothers, they would hunt. My dad tried going rabbit hunting one time, and he told me the story when I was a kid. Everything that could go wrong went wrong. The weather was bad. The rabbits were too fast. Well, yeah, the rabbits they're fast. You name it. My dad had short of something going wrong with the gun. Like that's the only thing that did not go wrong. But everything else went wrong. And so that he decided that was not his thing. He was going to stick to fishing. But I actually got into hunting. I I I grew up with watching it on TV, O'Neill Outdoors, Dance Fishing, but who Jeff Shockey, all those guys. So I grew up watching it, and it was something that always interested me. But getting into it, I didn't actually start doing it myself until I was fresh out of high school. I graduated high school in 2009, and I had met and it's all about people you know. It's something that I've always said. God puts certain people in your lives at certain times for certain reasons. And there is always a reason for somebody in your life. It might be permanent, it might be just for a season, but everybody in your life serves a purpose in your life. And I met through one of my high school friends at the time had invited me to the open house, graduation open house. And I met this lady that, oh yeah, I volunteer at this community event. This gentleman puts it on at his house. He lives on however many acres he lives on. I don't remember anymore. But he's also in a wheelchair. His name is Doug. And I said, okay, I'd be interested in meeting him. So long story short, skip ahead a couple of years, Doug and I met, and he was actually involved in a car accident when he was 16, thrown from his vehicle, paralyzed instantly. And he grew up hunting, fishing, farming, all that. And through different people in the community, they were able to get him back. He then created an organization called Fulfilling Life Ministries, which he doesn't do much with that anymore, but it's all about getting people with different disabilities out in the world, whether it's hunting, fishing, learning about farm equipment on his property, because his thing was the world gave back to me. People gave back to me. So I want to do the same. They helped me, so I want to give back. And so he took that and I met him and he reached out to me, after about a year after we met, said, hey, have you ever thought about going hunting? Because this is taboo for some people. I understand, but there is a place where I'm from in Michigan, about an hour and a half north of where I live. And it's a high fence. And I know some of these hunters, some of these guys, high fence property is a swear word to some of these guys. I understand. So there might be a few listeners out there that are like pulling up their noses and giving me dirty looks, and that's fine. But he's like, there's this place, it's called Legends Ranch. It's a high fence farm, and at that point, I didn't know what high fence ranch was. But he's like, I'm allowed to take a hunter out there, and you're guaranteed to get a deer, kind of a thing. And I said, yeah, I'd love to do that. And so skip ahead. I now have, this is 2010. This is, yes, 2010. Was supposed to be the one to take me. He ended up having an accident with his tractor. He busted his arm. So he calls me like 2 weeks before we're supposed to go. He's like, I can't make it. I'm going to end up needing surgery. I've got my buddy Dan. He said he'd love to take you if you're still interested. So, we're at Legends now. A couple weeks later, the last night of the hunt, I actually get my very first buck. And let me tell you, y'all, the fuse was lit at that point. From watching it on TV to now experiencing it myself, I was hooked. Like that is something that I wanted to continue for the rest of my life.
How old were you at this point?
I was, I had just turned 18 because I was right at the way they run it. It's a youth organization. They do it for special needs youth and then wounded warriors, Purple Heart veterans. And I was just at the age gap. I was just at that cap. 18 was the cutoff, and I had just turned 18 that previous summer, a few months prior. So they said, well, technically, but because you just turned 18, we're gonna, extend it. You're allowed to come whatever, blah, blah, blah. They're like, this is the only year you'll be able to do it, but we're going to honor it for you. So I said, great, so Doug pulled the strings that he needed to pull, whatever else. And so then we got there and 218-pound 8-point buck. And at that point, that was, I mean, the biggest buck in my life. That was like the biggest buck I'd ever seen, let alone was able to shoot. And since then, now that's been, like I said, 2010. So that's been 16 years ago. Since then, I've gotten 2 more 8 points. I've got a 9-point on the wall. I've been on TV for turkey hunting, and I'll tell more stories later.
Can I slow you down?
Yes, you can. Please slow me down because otherwise I will keep going.
So this first buck, first off, the high fence, do I judge it a little bit? Yes. For your situation, absolutely not. So you had an opportunity. If it wasn't for the high fence ranch, you might not be hunting to this day. How often do you think about the details of the hunt, like replay it in your head and all that stuff?
So often. So often. And
Then why don't you want to share it with us? All you said was you shot your first 8-point, man.
I didn't know how detailed you wanted me to get.
We want to live the moment with you, man. We want to live it. So
I will give you a play-by-play. Okay.
let's
You
do play
you
by
asked for
play.
this. You asked for this. Remember this. Okay. So here we are. Friday morning, everybody gets up. If you want something to eat, grab you a bagel or a muffin, cup of orange juice, whatever, coffee if you drink it. And then we're gonna be loading everybody up about 4:30 in the morning to drop everybody off at the spots, the blinds. And by daylight, you're gonna have so everybody had a guide, and then they were allowed to take whoever came with them. If it was mom, if it was dad, me, it was my buddy Dan, who I call Gramps, and I'll talk about him a little bit more a little later on, why I call him Gramps. So it's the hunter, the guide, and then whoever came with the hunter. And so you're out until about, I think if we didn't shoot a deer, we were packing up the blinds by about 10:30 in the morning. Earlier if you shot a deer, and you were allowed, no, this is okay, you were allowed two. You could do 2 bucks, you could do 2 doe, you could do a buck and a doe, you could do 2 doe, whatever. I just opted for one. I think, actually, no, I have to revise that. I think it was, if you shoot two, it had to be 1 buck, 1 doe. I don't think you could shoot 2 bucks, which I think later got changed down the road, but regardless. So the first day we're out and we saw, and again, because it's high fence, you're almost guaranteed to see deer. Like you're not gonna go more than a couple hours at most without seeing something. And so I was all excited, 10 minutes after daylight, you're seeing deer, you're hearing movement, like it's cool stuff. And I'm taking pictures and this is so cool. I'm thinking this is normal. Wrong. Nobody told me that the next year when I went hunting, on private property that was not high fence, that I wouldn't see jack. Nobody warned me about this. So, I always when I tell this story, I always preface it and say, as much fun as it was, and it was probably one of the most memorable experiences of my life. Because, like I said, it's 16 years, and I can still remember exactly what I was wearing the night that I shot my deer. I remember exactly what time. I can remember which way the deer was facing when I shot that deer. But that is the worst possible way to introduce someone into hunting, because then they go that next season thinking it's going to be the same thing, even without it being high fence. Like I'm thinking I'm going to go on my grandparents' property and see 10 deer a day, and shoot the biggest one. No, no, there have been several years now since then where I don't see a single deer, you know. So just saying, this is not the best way to start out a hunting career, if you will. But that being said, again, if it hadn't been for that, I probably would not have gotten my first deer, right? So Friday, like I said, getting back to the story, we are out, we're seeing a bunch of deer, you know, flashing them all. Me and the guide are looking at the same ones, making sure we're okay. Is this one? Nope, this one's too big. And with it being high fence, with it being geared for special needs, youth, and then wounded warriors, there's a criteria. You can't shoot, little Bambi. Obviously, you don't want to shoot Bambi anyway, but you can't shoot little Bambi, and you can't shoot, great granddaddy 20-point buck either, which I really, really wanted to because there was one deer that had like 15 plus points, and
Just
he gave
everywhere.
me just everywhere you look, there was little kickers, there was little knobs, and he walked 20 yards right out in front of my blind, and I had my gun on him, and I looked at the guy, and I'm like, "Can I?" And he's like, "No, no, I know you want to, but no." I'm like, "Well," he's like, "Well, I tell you what, if you have, because you can pay to go out there too. He's like, if you have X amount of money, whatever the dollar amount was back then, he's like, if you have X amount of money, you can shoot that deer." I never put my gun down so fast. I'm like, okay, this deer is just gonna walk away. Like, I really want to, but I can't. Don't have the money. So
Maybe
Friday,
next time.
maybe next time. Right. I still have not been able to get a deer like that. But you know what? I've gotten some really good deer. I'll talk about those a little later on as we go on. But trust me, I have more stories. So Friday morning comes, it ends, no deer. We've seen a few. Thought, okay, there's a couple of that would have been good shooters, but my dad reminded me, like, hey, we have tonight yet, we have all of tomorrow morning, we have all of tomorrow night. And it's like, if you don't get anything by tomorrow night, we'll go out Sunday before, the church service and everybody goes home. And I said, okay. So I have time. He's like, don't feel disappointed. Because there were a few people that had gotten some nice deer right away that first morning. So I was getting a little bummed. And he's like, you have time. You will get a deer, I promise you. And I said, okay. So Friday night, same thing. We've seen a couple nice ones. I had my gun on one he's like, you can if you want to, but I know there's bigger out there that, will come across. And I said, okay. So Friday night, same thing, packed up,
First it's too big, then it's too small.
too small. Exactly. I'm fussy. No, I'm just kidding. They were the fussy one. They were the first one. I would have been happy with, a 6 point at that point for my first year. But so there's one story. No, anytime I talk about this adventure, there's one story I have to tell. So skip ahead now. Saturday comes, Saturday morning. It is kind of foggy Saturday, as I remember. And so I seen a few, but nothing super clear enough to feel comfortable to take a shot on. So I'm like, I'm not comfortable with it. Then my guide, Paul was his name, he's like, that's fine. Like, I don't want you to do it if you're not comfortable. Like, okay. So we ended up packing up, about 10:30. Went back, had a breakfast, went fishing because they've got a big old lake on the property. And so they got pontoon boats, wheelchair accessible. And they said, yep, we're going to take everybody fishing for the afternoon. And then we'll, pack back up and go back out about 4:30 on Saturday again. So go fishing for the afternoon, catch and release, whatever. That's just as much fun for me. Catching and release. I love catching and keeping, but catching and release, just to have something to do, just to be outside. I love doing that too. I've got a pond near where I live now, and I go fishing every day if I can, either before work or when I get home from work. So went fishing for the afternoon and said, all right, time to get back in the blind. So you throw your hunting clothes on, get back out, and it is about 6:30 now, and deer are all in the field. I mean, they've been in the field already, but all of a sudden this 8 point comes in, and I'm glassing him. The guide is glassing him. Are you on this one? Yep, yep. Does he look like this? Yep. All right, cool. We're looking at the same one. He's like, that is a good buck. That's a shooter. He's like, you're allowed. You can shoot that one if you want. So I get the gun up and I'm following him and waiting for him to stop. And all of a sudden, something. I didn't hear anything. I didn't see anything, but something happened because all of a sudden, every single deer in that field, and there was probably 15, 16 of them, every single one of those deer scattered. And I dropped my gun down and I'm just like, what happened? He's like, don't get discouraged. Cause he could tell the look on my face. I was bummed. He's like, don't get bummed out. Don't get discouraged. He's like, they'll hide for a little bit. But if nothing comes out, if they can't figure out what spooked them, it might have just been that something fell. He's like, if they don't figure out what spooked them, they'll work their way back in. Sure enough, about 15 minutes later, 6:45, so about So now it's about 7 o'clock. They come back into the field. They're working their way, and a few minutes after that, that 8 point come back. And I got my eyes on him, and we start blasting him. At the same one, yep, okay. Get the gun up on him, and he positioned himself in between two trees. And clear shot. All the other deer were all around it, but nowhere within gun range. So I waited to make sure they were all clear of my sight. He gave me the green light. One shot, that buck never flinched. He dropped like a sack of rock right there. And a sigh of relief I breathed like you wouldn't believe. I was so excited. I was ecstatic. First phone call I made. Still to this day, as a 35-year-old man, it's still the first phone call I make anytime I get a deer or a turkey, my mother. And she and my daddy, before he passed away, my parents have always been my biggest supporters. And I didn't grow up in a hunting family. I did not grow up in a hunting family. And my parents were not against it by any means because they have always been the kind of parents to say, we want you to try it once. You don't know if you like it. You don't know if you can do it unless you try it. And, you're not always going to have us. So you need to be able to do this, and that on your own. And so they encouraged me to live life normally. And so, when I brought this whole idea up to them about going to Legend, they said, this would be a new thing for us. But yes, we want you to try it. If this is something that you want to do it. And, you have our support. And so, that Saturday is about 7:15. That buck is on the ground. I'm thanking the Lord. I'm thanking my buddy Dan and the guide Paul for, doing this with me. And they're like, all right, we're gonna go get the deer. We'll drag him to you, and then we'll get you out there next to him. I said, okay. So while they're doing that, they're going to get the deer. I'm on the phone with my mom and my dad, and I said, you're not gonna believe this. I got one. He's this big, he's this, that, and the other thing. And I'm giving him all the details. And I said, you'll see him Sunday when you guys come up to get me. Because then the other family members of the hunters that did not get selected to go along, they're allowed to come up, get pictures with the hunters and the deer, and be part of the church service that they put on in the morning and whatever else, and then a quick little lunch, and then everybody packs up and we're all on the road again by like 2 o'clock Sunday afternoon. It was, yeah, it's about 2 o'clock. So my mom and dad like, congratulations, we can't wait to see it. And Sunday comes, they drive up after our church service in the morning. They said, we're going to go to church and then we'll head right up. We'll see you about noon. And I said, all right, cool. And I'll never forget, my dad saw that deer. And I always get a little choked up talking about this because my dad, when I was growing up, my dad and I were best buds. I mean, if you have a dad in your life that is your buddy, yes, he was my dad. Yes, I had a healthy respect for him, and I never purposely did anything to cross him or hurt him. But my dad and I did a lot together. And so the look on his face of, that's my son, that's my boy, he did that, like that to this day was probably the coolest part of that whole thing. And of course, getting a deer head on the wall doesn't hurt either. But that, seeing how proud my dad was of me, because even growing up, we didn't know what God had in store for me. We didn't know what I would and would not be able to do. Because so a little backstory away from the hunting, when I was born two broken legs. I was born with extra cerebral fluid around my brain. So they had to do surgery on my head. My knot was not formed right, or my spine was not formed right. It formed in a knot at the base of my spine. And so they had to do, my back was open when I was born. So they had to do back surgery on me. They had to do head surgery on me. This is all within the first like 12 hours of my life. And I'm adopted. My birth mom, as soon as she got the okay, she checked herself out of the hospital. And she said, well, the doctors, the medical staff had said, well, your baby probably isn't going to survive, but you're free to go. Like, right. So you're good to go, but, your baby might not survive. So, but you don't want to stay and be behind you. No, she checked herself out of the hospital and said, okay, this is, this is where I'm at with it. Like, okay. So, then there was a nurse that, of course, the doctor to do all these surgeries. because the doctors didn't want to touch me. They said, well, there's no point in trying to save this baby because this baby cannot be saved. They labeled me back then as a throwaway baby, which means just put him in a little bassinet and within 12 hours he'll be dead. We're not going to waste the manpower and the hours on it. Like there's nothing that can be done. But this nurse, I always say God sent an angel in the form of this nurse because he pushed the doctors. He said, hey, no, you are going to at least try to save this baby. Like if it doesn't work, you oh well, you can at least say you tried, but you're not just gonna leave this baby aside and not do anything. So like I said, first 12 hours of my life, I'm getting head surgery, back surgery, cast on my legs to take my legs out, to fix my broken legs, to do what they could. And again, 35 years ago, medicine, it wasn't awful, but it wasn't what it is now. So back then, I mean, it was, what can they do? They do what they can, and that's it, which is, but they did the surgeries. I was in recovery and I stayed in the hospital for 5 weeks. He did not come back to claim me. And so they said, okay, this baby is now a ward of the state. He is going to be up for, foster care because birth mom checked out and hasn't come back. So they called my parents, who were one of the only licensed couples in the area to do foster care for medically fragile babies and children. So my parents, medically fragile, my parents dealt with wheelchairs, they dealt with feeding tubes, they dealt with kids, babies that were on oxygen 24/7. They dealt with severely mentally handicapped. So nonverbal, total care, not functioning, kind of. They were alive, but that was it, like the minimum. So that was what my parents did. And so the hospital then, or the hospital reached out to the foster care agency, who then reached out to my parents and said, hey, we've got this baby up for foster care. Are you interested? Well, my mother takes to babies like a deer hunter takes to a new gun. So, she heard baby and she's like, yes, we want it. And so they said, well, okay, this is what you need to know. This baby is going to be addicted to, it's got drugs in his system because birth mom was a drug addict. So baby's going to have, dependency on that. Baby's going to have this, baby's going to do this, da, 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 like a whole list of things that were wrong with me as a baby. And my mom said to those people, like, look, don't label him. Don't say he's going to be this or he's not going to be that. Like, let us take care of him. We will love him. We'll do what we can for him, and that's it. And they said, okay, oh, one other thing you need to know about this baby: he's black. Is that going to bother you? And my mom's like, as long as the kid ain't blue, I don't care. Why are you telling me he's black? What does skin color have to do with it? Now, to preface this, because my adopted parents are Caucasian, so, that's why the hospital staff, the foster care staff felt the need to let my parents know, your new foster baby is black. Okay, whoopee through. My parents are not racist. Like my mother said, as long as the kid ain't blue because of lack of oxygen, like, who cares? As long as he ain't blue, as long as he ain't purple, my mother's got a sense of humor. So she's throwing all these different colors. As long as he's not this, and this, we'll take him. So they said, okay, come get him, whatever else. And so my mom, my dad, and one of my older sisters came to the hospital and the nursing staff. So I was in the hospital bed. I'm on my stomach. And my mother still, when she tells the story, says I look like a chocolate snowman because I was in a white onesie and diaper, white socks, the little baby booties, and the white corrective cast on my legs. And I had not taken to anybody. I pretty much had been left alone by the hospital staff, other than for their routine, whatever checkups and whatever else. And so she asked, can I pick the baby up? And I said, yeah. She turned me over, picked me up, turned me over, and I smiled at her from ear to ear. The very first time I had smiled by God's grace was at my mother. And she looked at the hospital staff and she's like, yeah, we want this baby. Skip ahead 2 years. My birth mother had gotten in contact with my parents. She had been to visit a few times, but after 2 years, she said, you know what? He is healthy. You guys have helped him. Y'all have done this, this, and this. I will freely and clearly relinquish all right only if you adopt him because you can take care of him better than I ever would be able to. So she's like, I will sign it all away right now if you agree to take it. They said, yes, they've been waiting for that. And so she did probably the only decent thing, you know, she did for me at that point, which gave me up so my family could have me. And, 35 years later, I've got the best mother in the world. My father has since passed away, but had the best dad in the world. My best friend, my mom is my other best friend, I say, and we do so much together. And that's the other piece to a positive mindset is if you have people around you, whether it's friends, whether it's family, but especially family. If you got great parents, that's where it starts because having loving, supporting parents, that is what has kept me, besides my love for the Lord, that is what has kept me going all these years and got me hunting, supported that I wanted to try it. And since then, I've said, hey, mom, I've got invited to go on this hunt. I got invited, last year, May 2025, my buddy Scott called me. He's like, hey, I got a bear hunt lined up for us in Canada. Are you interested? And I went to my mom and I said, look, the only problem with this hunt is I'm going to be gone over your birthday. She's like, go with my blessing. We will celebrate my birthday when you get back, but you have a chance of a lifetime. And, and I look at that and the number one question I get asked is, do I wish I was not in the wheelchair? No, I don't. Because if it weren't for the wheelchair, I truly believe this with everything in my heart. If it weren't for the wheelchair, I don't believe I would be where I am today. I don't believe for a minute that I would have some of the adventures that I've gotten to have. I've been called a local, and I say this carefully not to brag. I've been called a celebrity myself because of some of the celebrities that I've gotten to meet and get pictures with and go fishing with or whatever the case, go hunting with. So it's like, I would not want my life any different. I tell people the only thing I would change, my dad would still be here because he died just as I was getting into my hunting stuff. So he saw my first buck, he saw my first turkey, but he didn't get to see my first bear, my second bear, all the other things I've gotten to do. That is the only thing I would change. But beyond that, my life is good. That's, you know,
It's what your birth mom did was unforgivable, but like the courage it took for her to like come back and visit you after doing that, that
mhm.
takes some balls.
It does. It does. You know, and I do commend her for because I truly believe I said, the only decent thing she did for me was give me up. Yes. But at the same time, I do believe there was a part of her because she did that. She was showing that she did care, because he did come back for a visit, once in a while as I was growing up, baby, my infancy, a couple of years. And then, finally admitted, like, look, even if he's free and clear to come back to me, I'm not going to be able to take care of him the way that y'all did. So he would be better off staying with y'all. And so for her to be able to own up to that, that does take guts. And I'm thankful that she did that. Because like I said, I don't think I would be here today, or I wouldn't have the quality of life that I do, if I had ended up back with her. Do I know that for sure? No, I don't.
You didn't end up in a wheelchair. I mean, it sounds bad, but it's probably good. She probably would have taken you home and you would have been in the same lifestyle she would have been in.
Exactly. More than likely. Yeah. You know,
It happens for a reason.
absolutely. Yep. I believe that my whole life long. Everything happens for a reason.
So your dad got to witness a couple other hunts. Let's go through those as well.
Yeah. So the next big one that I got to do. So 2010 was my deer hunt. 2012 was, it was a weird year because one of my sisters, I'm the youngest of five total, four older sisters. And my one sister had passed away after a surgery that had gone horribly wrong and just she would never be able to recover. But anyway, that same month that she passed away, actually. So May 2012, hunting season here in Michigan. My buddy Dan had called me. He's like, "Hey, I hope you got your turkey tag. I'm gonna take you hunting. I've got it all lined up. We're gonna be hunting on so and so's property this date in the evening, and then this date in the morning if we don't get anything in the evening." And I said, "Okay." He's like, "There's more." And this is another one of those stories where all of my hunting stories, I can remember exactly where I was. I can remember like right down to the t-shirt that I was wearing because this phone call happened. I was in the living room and my dad was still alive. This is my sister, I think had just passed away, but my dad passed away a couple of years later. So my dad's still alive for this story. And I'm in the living room. I had just been watching TV with my mom and dad. And my buddy Dan calls and he tells me all this. He's like, "There's a special guest that's going to be hunting with us." And I said, "Okay, what are you cooking up? Who's going to be hunting with us?" And he said, "Jimmy Gretzinger from Michigan Outdoors." And for anybody that's not in Michigan, Michigan Outdoors is our local hunting, fishing, outdoors TV show. It covers all of Michigan, and it's mainly hunting and fishing, but it's not only hunting and fishing. And I said, "You said who?" He's like, "You heard me right. Jimmy Gretzinger is going to be hunting with us. And he's going to take all of his camera gear with him. And he's like, if you get a turkey, he's going to film the whole hunt. And he's like, if you get a turkey, you're going to be put on TV." I darn near dropped my phone. And I'm sitting there, mouth just wide open. I was speechless for about 15 seconds. And my mom and dad at this point, they're seeing me and they're like, "Are you okay?" And my dad, he's like, "Shannon, Shannon, are you there? Shannon." And it's kind of like I like blanked out for a second. And I came back to it. I'm like, "You said who?" He's like, "No, you heard that right. I already said it twice." Yeah. And I'm like, he's like, "Yep, there's a possibility that you and I are going to be on TV." And he's like, "Get this, get that. And, be ready because this was like the next week." He's like, "Get all your stuff ready, because we're going to make this happen next week or whenever it was, a week, 2 weeks later, whatever." And I said, "Okay, cool." And I hung up the phone and my mom's like, "What did he tell you? What's wrong?" I said, "Your son might be on TV." And they said, "Wait, what?" So I told them, everything that Dan had just told me. And they said, "Go for it. Like, that would be so cool." So now the other story that I love telling, my turkey hunting story. Like I said, I have a million stories. You're going to have to cut me off at some point because I will go through 16 years worth of hunting stories. But turkey, May 2012, Friday afternoon, we'd gotten out and we had seen a couple of hens, no gobblers. There was a Jake, and he was like 100 yards out, obviously way further than a shotgun can take. And it's a Jake. I didn't want to shoot a Jake anyway, especially if I'm going to be on TV. So, okay, Friday, whatever else. Saturday. Saturday, we get up, and of course, again, early morning. I am getting used to early mornings now at this point. I've done it for a couple of years now, and still thinking, 4:30 in the morning is too early, but for the opportunity to be on TV, I'll take it. So Dan comes to get me. He picked me up. I was not driving yet. I didn't start driving until years later. But so he's like, "Be ready at about 4 o'clock. I'm gonna come get you. We're gonna meet Jimmy at the spot at the landowner's house or whatever." He's like, "The only problem with hunting Saturday is Jimmy has got to be at. I think he had to go down to the southern part of the state to film whatever other half of the show." He's like, "So we only have until about 9:30, 10 o'clock Saturday morning, if we're going to make this happen on TV." And I said, "Oh, okay. Nothing like putting a little pressure on me here." So we get out, it's before daylight. We get everything all set up and we set obviously until daylight and we break up the calls. We start doing a little bit of calling here and there, dead silent. The woods were, I mean, as still and as peaceful as you could imagine, which was nice, but at the same time, I didn't want peaceful. I wanted to hear a gobbler coming up behind us. Like I wanted something. It was peaceful. We had been calling at 7:30. We called off and on. We'd sat and listened for a while, and then we'd call again. We probably sat and called almost 2 hours, and it's getting to be about 9:30, almost 10 o'clock. Like it's pushing time to where Jimmy's got to pack up and go. And he's like, you guys can still hunt, but I'm gonna have to pack up here in a little bit. Like, okay. So I said, well, let's just call it. We've got the rest of the season between me and Dan. It was nice meeting you, whatever else. So Jimmy stands up, he folds his little, 3-prong hunting chair that he's sitting on. He closes the his camera. He had just shut his camera off, and he had just about packed away his stool. And he happened to look outside the blind. He leans back as he cuts in movement. And he leaned back, looked out the window, unpacks his chair, sit down. He's like, Longbeard. I'm like, what? He's like, shh, don't move. Don't say anything. There's a turkey, and he's about 20 yards from us to the right. Like he is coming in. So he quick sits down. He turns his camera back on. My gun, of course, like a newbie knucklehead, my gun is nowhere near me. I've got my gun laying up against the wall of the blind. So I'm like, damn. He's like, yep, I'm getting it. So he handed it to me. He's like, I'm gonna start calling. I'm gonna get his attention. So he starts, doing a couple of hen clucks, you know, and that bird puffed up. He strutted. He started walking to us. Well, then all of a sudden, we hear some more hand claps. And I looked at Dan, and I'm like, I whispered that. I'm like, are you doing this? He's like, that's not me. And Jimmy kind of turned ever so slowly and quietly. He turned and looked out the blind window behind us. He's like, we've got a hen behind us. So now this gobbler, he's fanned out, he's spread out, and he's going back and forth. He'll take about 10 steps out of view to that hen behind us. And then then Dan hits the call, and he'll turn around and he'll take 10 steps to us. And this went on for about 5 minutes, the longest 5 minutes of my life. Oh my word. It was probably not any longer than 5 minutes, but it felt like a lot longer. I'm sitting there, 'cause I got my gun up. I'm ready now. All he's got to do is stick his head in front of my window. But I got my gun up, and Dan called one more time, and that bird did a 180, and he came all the way out in front of us. He stopped at the decoys, puffed, and he strutted up. I put that bead right on his head, and he flopped right. I pulled the trigger, he flopped right over. And Jimmy looked at me. He's like, I got the whole thing on video. He's like, you're gonna be on TV. You could have knocked me over with a feather. I was so excited. Same thing as I did with Legends. They went to get the bird. I made a phone call. I'm like, Mom, Dad, I'm gonna be on TV. I just got a bird. Da da da. Blah blah blah. And so naturally, then the next question is, what do you want to do with this bird? Well, I want to get it mounted. So I have a full strut mount in my sunroom, and that one I had originally just planned on doing a tail fan because I've got a few tail fans in my room, stuff like that. But with it being a special Michigan Out of Doors TV bird, I'm like, no, I need to do something, but I need to get that one mounted. So mom and dad are like, absolutely, like we'll help you, we'll pay for that. Because there was in between jobs at that point, and so they're like, nope, this one you want to get mounted, we will pay for it. Like this is special. So Jimmy's like, give me a few weeks, and we'll edit it and whatever else. Because I've already got a few segments lined up, so we'll get it towards the end of the month. We'll get it up on the show. He aired it that next, it was a Saturday. So then a week and a half later, so that following Thursday, he aired it. And I'm like, wait, and the timing of it was very bittersweet because the Thursday that episode aired was also the Thursday that we did my sister's visitation. The next day we had her funeral. And so, I had a lot of people say, condolences and whatever else. But then they said, as soon as we leave here, we're going to go home and we're going to watch your episode. And so, for the longest time, people anywhere I'd go to the store, I'd go to a restaurant. Hey, I saw you on Michigan Outdoor. That was a really cool bird, and so there again, something that I don't believe would have happened if my life wasn't the way it was. But I mean, how many other people can say that they've been on TV, they've been in a magazine, several magazines, all that kind of stuff. So, but yeah, to be able to be on TV and just me, your ordinary guy, like that just doesn't happen. But it was a really cool experience for me.
Do you stay in touch with him to this day at
Yeah.
all?
Yeah. Yeah, I text not near as much as I should probably, but I mean, he is also, I mean, he's a full-time TV host. He's a dad of two, so I mean, Jimmy and I we connect with each other over the holidays. Hey, hope your Christmas went well, XYZ. Hope your hunting season's going good. I'll send him pictures if I get a deer or a turkey. When I shot my bear in Canada, I sent him that picture. So, we probably reach out to each other couple times a month, you know.
It's pretty good.
Oh yeah.
We got one time for one more story, so
So last year, May 2025, my buddy, well, it really goes back to like early 2025. My buddy Scott and I had been talking. I had mentioned one of my bucket list hunts was a black bear hunt in Canada. I would love to get out and either get a color phase black bear or just a giant bruiser of a regular black bear, whatever. Just being able to go out in Canada because that's every hunter's dream. I don't care who you are. I don't care where you're from. At some point, every hunter is drawn to either Alaska or Canada for bear and or moose. Like it's gonna happen. And I told him that. I'm like, that is something that I would love to do. Well, a few months later, he's like, "Hey, remember how you were talking about wanting to go to Canada?" Like, yeah. He's like, "I found there's an outfitter that'll do it. That can accommodate your chair. That can do this. That's giving you a discounted price. Like they discounted it a couple $1,000 actually, because my half of it was literally half of what his was. So he's like, they're giving you a heck of a discount and this, that, and the other thing." And I said, "Okay, what do I need to do? How much time do I need to take off?" So we leave Friday morning early, get there Sunday at mid mid morning, early afternoon. It was like noonish when we get there. And they're like, "Okay, you guys settle in, get unpacked. We'll have lunch ready for you. We'll get Scott shooting his bow. Shannon, you're gonna get your gun." I chose my gun. I'm shooting a 450 Bushmaster. That gun got me my very first bear here in Michigan. That got me my 8-point buck 2 years ago. Like I love my 450. And I said, "All right, let's go get that shot." Got that sighted in, ready to go. And so the plan, we were going to hunt Sunday afternoon till dark. And then if we didn't get anything, we had that whole week to go hunting. And we both went into the hunt with a criteria because Scott had been bear hunting several times. He was looking for something very specific. And because I've already got a bear here in Michigan, I was also looking for something specific. Like I wanted something that was 300 pounds or bigger, or it had to be a color phase, brown or blonde or something unique. And so we had both decided we were not, no matter what we saw, we were not going to shoot that first day. Keep that in mind as I tell this story. Okay. So neither one of us were going to shoot. As hard as it was, we were just going to, whatever came in, we were going to let it walk because if it came in the first day, more than likely it would come back again later on in the week. We would have several chances at color phase or at big bear or whatever. So we're shooting the guns. We were riding in side by sides. And so they took him one way, they took me another way. And so we're safe distance. We're nowhere near each other. We're like 45 minutes away from each other in distance. So basically opposite ends of the hunting property. We got me in a pop-up blind. He's in a tree stand and the guide, Dale is his name. He's going through the camera for the trail cam. He's pulled the chip out. He's got it in his phone or whatever. So we're looking through. He's like, "That would be a very good bear." He's like, "That is a monster bear." The gut is just about dragging on the ground. Like this is easily 400-pound bear, if not bigger. And he's like, "That one was here this night, that night, and the other night. So there's right around 5:30. He's like, there's a very good chance that bear will come in." So cool. All right. So we get set up, got my gun loaded, ready to go. Because in Canada, you can't travel with a loaded gun. So once you're in, you're all set up, then you load your gun or load your crossbow if you're hunting crossbow, knock your arrow if you got a regular bow, whatever. You have to be safe, is what I'm saying. So we get the gun loaded, okay, ready to go. It gets to be 5:27, if I remember correctly. He and I are going over shot placement. They had talked shot placement with me a little bit back at the lodge, but not in extent. We're like, let's talk shot placement. He's like, if this is, the bear, this is the top of the bear, this is the bottom of the barrel, you want to go middle of the bear, and you want to be like middle of the middle. And I'll never forget the way he said that. You want to be middle of the middle. So you put your sight on the top of his back and you go by the middle and then you go to where like his nose is and you go back and you want to be like middle of the middle. And the way he said that, I'm like, okay, that makes sense. And he's like, wait for a good broadside shot or, slightly quartering. You want to make sure the vitals are exposed and he's going over it with me in minute detail. Like he really wanted to make sure I was good. I felt good about the shot that I was about to take if I was able to take a shot. And as he's talking, now for anybody listening that has never been bear hunting, the first thing I will tell you is the first thing that they told me. The bear, when it comes in, you will not hear a bear walking unless that bear wants you to. I don't care if it is Winnie the Pooh at 50 pounds a cub or if it is Yogi at 500 pounds. That bear is not going to make a sound coming into the wood. And they told me that, and I started laughing. I'm like, yeah, right. Like, and I asked him that. I said, well, okay, what if this bear is like over 400 pounds? You're telling me that much weight isn't going to make a sound? He's like, that bear will not make a sound unless he wants you to know he's there. So skip ahead. Now it's a couple minutes later, so 5:30, and he's telling me, like I said, all the different things, what to know about how to shoot, whatever else. And he grabs my arm. He's like, "Don't move." And I'm like, "What?" He's like, "You see that big black dot?" I'm looking, and I see a big black dot, and oh my word, I see a big black dot moving. And all of a sudden, I could just see like his paw at first, and then all of a sudden, I saw his head. That wasn't even a head. That was a melon. That thing was the biggest skull I've ever seen. And I'm sitting there and I've been hunting 16 years, like I said. I get buck fever to where you get shaken. I've had that. I have never had buck fever. I have never had buck fever so bad. I have never sat in a blind and shook so bad. I was calm, cool, and collected. And as soon as I saw that bear walk in, I was shaking like I had just downed a year's worth of caffeine. Like it was so bad. I was shaking so bad he could hear my chair shaking. That's how bad I was shaking. He's like, Shannon, 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 you got to take a breath. Otherwise, you're not going to make a good shot. He's like, I will not let you shoot this bear if you can't calm down. And I took a couple of good deep breaths and I settled myself down. I was still shaking a little bit, but not near as bad. I was actually able to hold the gun steady. But this bear, it had my nerves just strangled because he came in a lot closer than what we thought he was going to come in. He came in at about 40, 50 yards. We thought he was going to come down range about 70, 80 yards because that's where the bait barrel was. And so he come in and he's kind of cautious. He's sniffing around, doesn't notice anything. So I'm like, okay, he doesn't smell us. He doesn't hear us. We're good. I get the gun ready just in case. And I looked at Dale, my guide, standing sitting next to me. I said, I never heard him. I never heard him. He's like, I told you. I said, they will not make a sound unless they want you to know they're here. And I said, but a bear that size? He's like, it don't matter. I said, I never heard him. He's like, I told you. He's like, get ready. He's going to give you a shot. So he wandered down to the bait barrel and he's milling around. He's eating stuff. He's playing with the bait barrel a little bit, whatever else. And he goes to stand up. scratch himself on a tree. This bear stood over 7 foot tall on his hind leg. And I'm sitting there. I am just in pure shock. Like this bear, he was shocked too. He's like, this bear is big. He's like, that's the big bear that was on the camera. That's the bear that I just showed you. Because he's got his phone back up now. I've got my phone. I'm taking pictures and videos. He's got his phone up, and he's got the trail cam pictures pulled up, and we're comparing. Like there's okay, yep, that's him. He's like, that's that big bear. So between the two of us, we had already decided, yes, if he gives me a shot, I'm gonna shoot. He's like, you sure you want to shoot him? And it's only the first night. I said, I'm not letting him. I looked at him. I said, is that a bear that you would shoot? He's like, Shannon, that is one of the biggest bear I've ever seen. I said, then I'm shooting him. He's like, go for it. If he gives you a shot, I want you to take him. Well, amongst all this, guy had also shot a bear. And so our lodge owner, Arlie is his name, he had texted Dale, my guide, and said, we're going to get Scott. He just shot one. We're going to go help him recover it. And I started laughing quietly, of course, but I started laughing myself. And Dale's like, what are you laughing at? I said, Scott said he wasn't going to shoot. We both, on the way out there, said we were not going to shoot opening day. And he just shot one. And here, if this bear gives me a shot, I'm not letting him get away. He's like, that's your choice. I said, Scott shot a color phase. He's like, you think so? I said, that is the only reason he would shoot on the first night because of how many bears he's got under his belt already. I said, if he's shooting one, it is either a monster bigger than this one or it's a color phase. He's like, well, I guess we'll see if you're right. I texted Scott and he's like, yep, I shot one. I said, what is it? He's like, nope, you focus on your hunt. Because I had just texted him like half an hour before saying that, there's a bear in the field I'm about ready to shoot. So I had asked him, I said, what did you shoot? He's like, nope, you focus on your bear. We'll talk about mine afterwards. This is for you. You can't do that to me because now I'm nosy. I'm curious. And he's like, you'll see soon enough. The guys are here. We're going to get mine. You get yours. I said, okay. So, quit texting him, put my phone away. And that bear decided he was just going to politely walk out of view after feeding by the bait barrel for 45 minutes. And I timed it. There's like 45 minutes on my GoPro footage. And so he had gone out of my line of sight. And so I'm thinking he's gone. I'm thinking I just missed a chance at shooting the biggest bear I will probably ever see. Well, what I did not know is that bear only took a few steps out of my view and went and lay down. He never left. I just couldn't see him because Dale sitting next to me saw the whole thing. He told me that a couple of days later. He's like, oh, by the way, that bear never left. He just left your sight. But I wasn't going to tell you that. I said, well, why didn't you tell me the minute that you saw him laying there? He's like, would you have been able to shoot him? If you knew that he was there, would that not have made you all nervous again? I said, yeah, I probably would have. He's like, okay, the other piece. If I told you that he was still there and he got up and kept walking away and never came back, would you have been disappointed? I said, I would have been very disappointed. He's like, that's why I didn't tell you. I said, that's good. He's like, I did not want you to be disappointed on the off chance that bear never gave you a shot. And I said, okay, back to the hunt. So we're sitting there. That bear's laying there about half an hour. It's now 5:30. The bear came in. Scott shot his. So now it's say about 7:30. That bear stands up. He's like, Jack, get ready. He's coming back. I walk, and he walks back into my view, and I got him. And he's like, let him come until you can get a shot. Let him, get some camera footage. I looked at him. I said, Dale, I've already got enough footage. He gives me a shot. I'm shooting him. I said, okay. He's like, that's the one. That's the same one. You're good. You're clear to shoot him if you can. So he takes a step. He opens up his vitals. I drilled one right in the long space. He did barrel. He kind of did a little Yui because he went that way and then he popped a Yui and went to my right and just like, you got him, you hit him, this and that. But that bear ran over 100 yards before he piled up. And we didn't hear a death moan. We didn't hear a growl. We didn't hear anything. Not every bear. You'll see it happen on these hunting shows. The bears will give out a death groan. Not every bear does the death groan. My Michigan bear did not. and my Canada bear did not. And so we didn't know, but we knew I'd hit him. He went back and watched the camera footage because he had his camera out. He went back and watched. He's like, "You hit him." Like, I know you hit him, and this, that, and the other. And I went back, and my GoPro didn't pick up the shot very well, so I couldn't. Well, hmm, my GoPro. My GoPro picked up everything until the shot because I had accidentally turned my camera off to save battery because I forgot to take the other battery with me. And then when the bear came back into view from laying down, I was so amped up, I forgot to hit record again. So my GoPro was on, it just wasn't recorded. I didn't have any footage of the actual shot, which I still kicked myself for that one. But I called, he called Arlie. He's like, Shannon just shot one. Come help us when you get Scott's Bear. I quick, of course, called my mother. I said, Mama, you're not going to believe this. She's like, you got one. I said, yeah, I did. She's like, I knew it. The minute I saw your name come up on the phone, she's like, I knew you were calling to tell me you got one. How big is it? I said, I don't know, but I think it's a massive, massive bear. And she's like, well, get pictures when you can and call me back. I said, okay. So I hung up and I quick called Scott and I said, I got one. I said, that one that I told you that was in view a couple hours ago? He's like, yeah. I said, he's on the ground. I think. He's like, what do you mean you think? I said, I shot him, but, Dale's out there a little bit trying to find some blood. He hadn't found anything. He's like, well, okay. If you shot him, if you hit him good, we've got my bear loaded up. We're on our way to you. We'll be there in about 45 minutes. Because again, opposite end of the property. He's like, we'll be there in about 45 minutes and I will help these guys track. And if you shot him, if you hit him good, we will find him. So Scott and the guys all got together. They started looking. Half of them went one way, the other half went the other way. And all of a sudden I hear, yeah. I'm like, they got him. They found him. I'm sitting there. I'm nervous because at this point, they've been tracking maybe 5-10 minutes. No blood, no hair, no nothing. And what I didn't know at the time, Scott told me later, he found a little. It was almost like throw up, but the bear didn't throw up. It was just like gray, like almost stomach matter. And it's like, okay. So he tracked that and then, a little bit here, a little bit there. And then he found some drops of blood. And then he tracked that to, finding the bear. And they all let out a Yahoo and he come running back and he had a look on his face that I could see even from 80 yards away. He's like, he come up to me running to the blind. He's like, Shannon, you just shot the biggest bear I've ever seen. And now my buddy Scott, he likes to tease me a little bit. So I'm thinking, he's trying to amp me up. He's trying to be a stinker. I said, yeah, okay. He's like, no, look at my face. And I looked up from my phone because I'm texting a couple people that I had just shot one. And I look up at his face and I'm like, you're serious. He's like, I am dead serious. You just shot the biggest bear I have ever seen. This thing is at least 350, maybe more. He's like, it's probably more like 400, maybe bigger. And I'm like, God, he's like, I'm not kidding. I promise you. He's like, you'll see. We're going to get you out there and you'll see for yourself. He's like, this is the biggest bear. He's like, this is bigger than any bear I've ever shot. Huh? He's like, yeah. So I'm like, okay, well, what do we got to do? He's like, we're going to get a tarp out. We're going to put it in the sled. We'll put you in the sled. And then us guys will just drag you in the sled out to the bear. Because he, like I said, he ran about 100 yards before he piled up. And we get to this bear. And every deer, every bear, every turkey, whatever, has a little bit of ground shrinkage. They always look bigger when you shoot them than when they're actually on the ground. This was not the case. I got up to this bear and Scott took a video of it. My jaw dropped. I think I dropped my phone in the cart that I was in, the sled that I was in. And I'm sitting there just mouth wide open. I'm dumbfounded. I'm like, what's that? They're like, yeah, that's the bear that you just shot. I'm like, that thing? He's like, I told you that is the biggest bear I've ever seen. He's like, I was not lying to you when I said that. And I grabbed that paw. I couldn't even lift that paw. It was so big. Like I grabbed that paw and just that paw like took over my entire face. And I sat there and just in awe. And we got pictures and some videos and I played a prayer of thanks and I took pictures of the wazoo, right? Took a few pictures. I texted my mom. I called her. I'm like, did you get the pictures? She's like, how big is that bear? That's like he's over 300 pounds. He's probably pushing 4. So we get it back to the lodge, and they got the excavator, the small excavator, with a scale attached and everything else, and they're trying to winch this thing with a scale up in the air to weigh him. It got to 367 pounds, and it broke the arm of the excavator. And the head and the shoulders were still on the ground. So we figured this bear is 450, 500 pounds is what we
Really?
established. Yeah, yeah. And so I called my mom one more time, I think, and I said, Mom, this bear is probably over 400 pounds. She's like, you're getting this thing mounted, right? I said, I was gonna ask you if I could. She's like, Shannon, this is a once in a lifetime bear. You need to get this thing mounted. Like we need to do a full, but my now, okay, going back to my parents were not in the hunting, thing when before I got into it. My mother does flowers and she does because she's from the Netherlands, so she does blue delft and all the Dutch knickknacks and everything else. That was the decorations of our house when I was growing up. All the Dutch little knickknacks. We went from that to we now have deer heads on the wall, and we have bears, and we have this, and we have that. And so for my mother to tell me that I need to get this thing mounted, that is, that was a miracle to me. I'm like, Mom, did you? She's like, yes, I just said that. Yes, I know what I'm saying. She's like, that is a big bear. You need to get this thing mounted. So I'm currently waiting on my taxidermist to give me a call and say that my 7'2", 500-pound black bear full body mount is ready to be picked up. If you would ask me 20 years ago, did I ever think I'd be able to go to Canada and go on a bear hunt? No, I did not think that. Like, I've always believed I can do anything with God's help, but telling me that I could go to Canada, I didn't think that was ever going to be a thing. So yeah, and you might just have to have me back on again someday because I've got so many more stories I could tell, but those few are some of my favorite ones.
Sounds like some pretty good stories, man.
Oh, yes.
Have you listened to any episodes yet?
I think I've listened to a part of one. I never got a chance to finish it, but yes, I've listened to bits and pieces.
So we usually wrap up with a couple different parts. One, I'll ask a few rapid fire questions. Don't need to go into too much detail, just quick answer, and then we'll finish with some embarrassing stories.
Sad thing is I got a couple in mind already.
The 5 rapid fire questions. First one, best hunting gear purchase you've ever made.
My 450 Bushmaster.
Nice. Is it an AR or bolt action?
That is a bolt action. I love my bolt action rifles.
Most gimmicky hunting purchase you've made.
I just put it away too. One of the Doe bleat cans.
Really?
Nah, they don't. I've not had any success with them.
Hunting luck versus skill. Percentage of each one.
Yeah, I would say it's probably 50-50. I mean I've never really believed in luck, but a lot of it is just, it's you gotta be at the right place at the right time.
Very good. Most controversial hunting hot take.
Like I said at the beginning of it, the high fence thing.
And most underrated hunting tactic.
Most underrated, I think, most underrated hunting tactic is hunting with hounds. Because, and I won't go into great detail for sake of time, but my Michigan bear that I got to do, that was with a family that has hounds that hunted over bait with hounds or whatever. And that does not get talked about enough. That is such a cool thing.
Appreciate you sharing those. Let's wrap this up with a couple embarrassing stories.
One involves my dad, because of course it did. Me and my dad did everything together. We were coming home and he had just picked me up. I was working with him, take your kid to work day kind of a thing. And so we were done with work for the day. We were heading home, had to get the car washed. Well, the car we had back then, this is 20, 25 years ago, the car we had back then had a sunroof. Now, I know what you're thinking. Don't beat me to the funny part yet now, because we had gone up to the car wash. He's like, all right, check all the windows, make sure they're all closed. Yep, check the windows. And I had double checked the sunroof and it was closed. But what I did not know is there was 2 different ways to open up the sunroof. You could open it all the way, or you could just open it, just that little bit where that lip would come up. That was open and I didn't realize it. So the windows are good and we shut the sunroof part on the inside, the fabric part, and we're going through the car wash. And all of a sudden, I look up and I can see the ceiling is a little like it's damp. And no sooner do I say that, my dad and I got an unexpected shower. And I thought you closed. I can still hear him. I thought you closed. Well, come to find out, that little part was still open, just enough to like completely stoke me, my dad, and the whole front seat of the car. And we got home, but my dad was not one to get mad easy. My dad was not happy. We get home, and my mother still to this day describes us as coming home looking like two drowned rats, is what him and I looked like. We came in the house, and she looked at us. She's prepared. She's getting dinner on the table. She looked at us, and she about hit the floor laughing. And she's like, "What happened to you two?" And we went through the car wash, is all my dad said. And I didn't know whether to laugh or not because mom is laughing, daddy's upset, and I'm somewhere in the middle. Like, I'm upset, but I think it's funny, because I mean, we're okay. We're wet, we're cold, and we smell like car wash soap, but we're okay, you know. But so that was embarrassing, but funny at the same time. The other one happened probably right around that same time frame, actually. So being in Holland, it's Dutch community. We've got what we call Dutch Village, Windmill Island. You learn all about the Dutch heritage, all that kind of stuff. Well, we have, Dutch Village, downtown Holland, and it's a tourist trap. You can learn all kinds of things. You can watch them make wooden shoes, get the Dutch candies, all this kind of stuff. Well, my sister, my middle of the four sisters, she wanted to take me and her two kids, because my niece and nephew and I are all about the same age. For context, I am a lot younger than my siblings. There is about a 20 plus year age gap between my oldest sister and myself. So just to clarify that. So my middle sister and her two kids, they said, "Yep, we're going to take Shannon for the afternoon. We're going to go to Dutch Village, have fun, whatever." So we're at the end of the trip, getting ready before we load up in the car. She's like, "Well, you guys get, by the bird bath, and I want to get pictures of the three of you." Okay. So I get out of my chair and I'm sitting, on the edge of this fountain between my niece and nephew, and my sister goes to take a picture. And all of a sudden, I try to reposition myself. And the one thing with being paralyzed from the waist down, balance. There is no balance. You have no sense of balance. If you are sitting on the edge of something, you better be hanging on. Because if you try to just free sit, you're going to lose your balance. You're either going to fall forward or you're going to fall backwards. In this case, I fell backwards. Fortunately, or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, I fell in the water, which had already been visited by hundreds of ducks and geese and whatever else. So it smelled like you would not believe. I, before getting in my sister's car, had to buy a whole new change of clothes because I smelled awful and immediately had to jump in the shower as soon as I got home. My sister, my niece, and my nephew, as soon as they knew I was okay, hit the ground laughing. I was so mad I could have spat nails. They were sitting there laughing. And again, got home. She dropped me off. Mom and dad were like, "What happened to you?" I said, "I don't want to talk about it." And my sister laughing. "He fell backwards, this, that, and the other thing. He's okay, but this, that, and the other." And I'm just like, "You can go home. Thanks for the fun day, but you can go home." And every time we get together, my niece, "Hey, Shannon, you remember?" "Yes, I remember. I try not to, but yes, I remember. Don't talk about it." So that was kind of my embarrassing moment of my childhood.
You got any embarrassing hunting related stories?
Oh, those. Okay, okay. Let's see. So the short version of this story, we used to we know a guy down in Illinois that used to let us hunt his property for turkeys. And so March we would go down to Mississippi, April we would go to Illinois, and then May we would hunt here in Michigan. And so me and Dan, who so Dan again, I call him Gramps. He's in his 80s, and he took me. Him and his wife both kind of took me under their wings as like an adopted grandson. And so, I asked him that one time if I could call him Gramps. He's like, I would love that. And so for the last like 10, 12 years, his nickname had been Gramps because he reminds me of how my mom describes what her dad would have been like. So we're down in Illinois and hunting turkeys. We had been hunting all morning, kind of like with Michigan. Didn't see anything, didn't hear anything. It's 10:30. We're both tired and hungry. Like, okay, I'm gonna go get the truck. I'm gonna leave you the shotgun, but I'm gonna go get the truck and I'll come back and pick you up. Okay. So he goes. He leaves me the shotgun. Couple minutes later, he comes barreling back and he dives. He had left the blind zipper open a little bit. And he dives into the blind, like literally just full scale, does a Superman dive into the blind, zips the blind back up. And I said, what happened? He's like, you remember that ravine that we passed? I said, yeah. He's like, there are six birds. There are six turkeys. They look like longbeards. They're either jakes or longbeards. He said there's six birds in that gully, in that ravine. And they're coming this way. They almost saw me. I had to crawl on my belly all the way back here. And I said, gotcha. Okay. So I grabbed my gun. He's like, I'm gonna start calling. He calls, and one by one, they all gobble, they all answer, and they're getting closer. So every few seconds, he hits the call, they answer. The last time he hits the call, all six gobble at once. And that sent every hair on the back of my neck up on edge because they were all less than 5 yards from us. They'd come up behind us, and he's like, don't move. They are right here. And I'm looking, I didn't move. I had my gun ready. And I just slightly turned my head to where I could see out the window. And I could see three of them on my left, and out the other window, three of them on my right. And they were close enough. I could have grabbed one around the neck and just squeezed. They were that close. They get out in front. I go to grab the gun. I go to get the gun up. And this is the embarrassing part. I went to shoot. I flat missed. There are six birds. I had picked one. The other ones, of course, were a safe distance away. And I flat missed. They were less than 20 yards away. And I'm like, and of course, then they all scatter and we don't see him again. I looked at him and he looked at me like, what happened? I said, I felt good about it. He's like, where did you aim? I said, right where you told me. He's like, what happened? I said, I don't know, but I missed him. I immediately traded that gun in. There was a single shot, 20 gauge. I like my 20 gauges because of surgery that I've had on my shoulder and stuff like that. A 12 gauge, it just kicks a little too much for me. Like I can handle it, but my shoulder is definitely feeling it afterwards.
You need a 410, buddy,
Or a 410. I've been looking at getting one of those.
for turkey hunting.
Yeah, I've heard 410 are good for turkey hunt.
Just got to make sure you use a TSS.
Yeah, that's exactly what I've been hearing. Yep. I've been thinking about switching to TSS anyway, because the ammo I've been using, I'm not impressed with lately. So, yeah, that's my embarrassing hunting story. One of them, anyway.
You definitely had some good stories. Glad I pried that first story out of you to get you open up a little bit.
I'm glad you did too.